All right, let's get started. Thank you for attending this webinar on arranging no-cost transportation for your patients, especially taking time out on this election day. If you haven't voted, I hope you will vote. Exercise one of our greatest American liberties and freedoms and peaceful exchange of power. We've got a lot of challenges in this country, and transportation to healthcare is one of them. And we hope that after this webinar, we'll be better equipped for you and your patients to serve their needs for transportation to access care. So we're going to provide you with some useful information on free air transportation, ground transportation, commercial transportation for you and your patients. The webinar typically lasts about 45 minutes depending on questions, so we've allotted an hour for any questions and answers, and we encourage you to ask lots of questions. If you haven't already, you will probably get tired of my nasally voice. So the more questions we have and the more interactive we can make this, I think the better. And I know you have unique needs facing you every day with your patient load and patient care. We are here to help, and we want to serve you. And if we don't know the answer, we want to learn the answer for you. So please ask as many questions as you can. There's a tool right there on the webinar that allows you to ask those questions. And I'll give you the information later, but you can also message us via email at josho@angelflightwest.org. You can also call us too anytime, 310-390-2958. So I mentioned my name. I'm Josh Olson. I'm the head cheerleader or executive director here at Angel Flight West. I've been working at Angel Flight for over 12 years. I've been the executive director for close to 3. I came up on the program services side, so I'm well versed in a lot of these issues. And one of the reasons we're doing this is we know that a lot of people don't know about all the resources or are overwhelmed with the number of resources and tools that we have. And so we're trying to give some clarity and define some of those different niches when it comes to charitable transportation as it relates to healthcare. So why are we hosting this webinar? Well, many of you probably already know that access to healthcare is the second biggest barrier to receiving care after cost. So it's a major problem. There's 3.2 million Americans are not receiving healthcare because access is a challenge to them. You know, to put that in perspective, that's a population the size of Chicago. We are meeting a small part of that need here at Angel Flight West, and we'll tell you more about that. But there's other groups trying to maintain this as well, and there's a good group that I would encourage you checking out called Health Outreach Partners that has done a lot of research in this area if you're interested in more research. So we are dedicated to removing that barrier, and we work together with others that are also dedicated to work that. And we want, like I said to start, we want to raise the awareness in the healthcare community and the patient community that there are many options for transportation, and many of which are no cost. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, we will talk a little bit about charitable aviation, which is our field here at Angel Flight West, common reasons for patient travel, types of travel, and some of the resources for each type, patient stories, spreading the word, and then, like I said, we'll take some questions and answers. The resources we discussed are listed in an ebook that we'll email to all participants that signed up afterwards. Also, this webinar will appear on YouTube that you can use or share within your departments if that's helpful. And this will be the last version, hopefully, where this will not apply towards continuing education credits. We are working on that because we serve many different states. They're all a little bit different, but we are working with the NASW, the National Association for Social Workers, to give continuing education credits for this. So we'll update you on that for the next round of this, and we'll see if we can apply those retroactively. So let's talk a little bit about charitable aviation. Charitable aviation in the U.S. takes many different forms. Many charitable aviation organizations exist across the country to help people who need travel to medical treatment. There is in the neighborhood of about 100 different charitable aviation groups, volunteer pilot groups, and about half of those are actually dedicated to patient travel. These groups are typically provided by individuals So these are private pilots who own or rent their own airplane. Think of like a 4 to 6 seat single engine propeller type plane for the most part, although we do have members that fly more capable aircraft and even jets. And there are also donated tickets from airlines, rail and bus services, which are coordinated by these same organizations and collaborated with other organizations. So a lot of people don't know about charitable aviation, but every day there are dozens of flights taking off, transporting people to and from healthcare. This sector has been around for over 35 years, flies more than 10,000 flights per year, has more than 6,000 volunteer pilots that have volunteered their time, their costs of their airplane to donate to others who need it. It is available across the United States and in a couple of other countries as well, including Canada, Australia, and limited in Europe. And it's really here, we're here to serve. Our pilots have a heart to serve. They love flying and they're passionate about helping other people. So it's really the best reason for them to use their hobby, skills, and passion to help others. In terms of the patient qualifications for our services, think of these as non-emergency flights. So we'll get into air ambulances a little bit later. You all are probably familiar with how the air ambulance service works in your particular healthcare facility, and those are typically paid by insurance and are rapid response in really dire situations. These services are for ambulatory medically stable patients that need to travel to and from scheduled healthcare for the most part. Sometimes it's when people are being discharged and they're healthy and they've got a little bit of time, and we'll get into the requirements for that. But we are non-emergency. It's a lot of things for advanced care, cancer treatment, clinical trials, pre and post-transplant appointments, things that you couldn't access locally that you need to travel to, and you can be ambulatory and get off a small airplane and endure those flights on your own. We do require there be some sort of financial need or other compelling consideration, either geography, immune compromise, something like that. We're not typically strict on these. We're not looking for IRS returns or tax statements, but we do need to be clear that the patient's need is worthy of these pilots' donation, because we do have limited resources. And many of these are donations in kind, equal thousands of dollars. Like I said, the pilots want to do that, but that's why we require that need. And we recognize, obviously, that even middle to upper class folks with a serious illness can deplete their resources really quickly. Medical care, as you all know, is the leading cause of bankruptcy in our country. So we know that can happen, especially if it's extenuating care, and we're happy to help in those situations. So the different travel needs, we talked a little bit about the air ambulance emergency situations, and talked a little bit about the other needs. Second opinions is another one that people travel for. One that we didn't mention, we're being with a loved one who's coping with a serious illness, or you're a caretaker. You need to travel to be with someone in end stages. Charitable air transportation just doesn't cover the patient. We can support passengers as well, companions. There is challenges with weight and balance sometimes, depending on how many people and how much they weigh, but we can walk through those with you when you request your flight. But loved ones too often need to travel back and forth. Let's say a child is in extended children's hospital care. Mom and or dad have to travel back and forth to be with the other kids, or to keep a job and benefits and all that kind of thing. So we're happy to help in those situations as well. We also help with domestic violence relocation, special needs camps for kids with rare illnesses. We really take any compelling human need. So if you're wondering if we can help in a particular situation, ask us. We often can. We try to help as many people as we can and be as flexible as we can within our capabilities. So obviously, you know that options vary based on the patient's situation when it comes to travel. Emergencies is typically air ambulance, and that's typically handled by state and local authorities, not coordinated by hospital personnel except on the receiving end. Same with air ambulance. And then we talked about medically stable and ambulatory patients. That's really where these volunteer pilot organizations and charitable air transportation comes into play, and the caregivers or family members that we talked about. So the types of travel, local, international, domestic, long distance, domestic, regional. We get all sorts of requests, and I'm going to walk through the different resources we have for each one. So let's start with local travel. So many people have trouble getting down the street for their appointments. This happens a lot with the elderly or people who have mobility issues. Happens with people that have trouble sort of navigating an urban or rural landscape. The resources for local travel really vary greatly from community to community. We mentioned earlier a resource, Health Outreach Partners, and there's their website there. They've done a lot of work kind of plowing this ground and are good connectors of these local groups. There's also new groups coming up like Dial-A-Ride and Butterfly. Dial-A-Ride's been a long time, but Butterfly is another one for people with mobility issues that need to travel. It's kind of like the Uber for mobility, and they're rapidly rolling out that service. There's other ebook recommendations that we'll send you after this that you can check in your area for ground transportation. I know a lot of you get taxi vouchers and Greyhound vouchers and that type of thing, but there's some other groups that often will provide local travel. Red Cross is one of them that will drive cancer patients to and from treatment locally, and other communities have similar groups with volunteer drivers. We do have volunteer drivers as part of our program, but right now they're only supporting flights that are coming into the airport, meeting the patient there and transporting them to care or to lodging and vice versa. We'll get into that a little bit more later as well if anyone has questions on those. So international travel, we get this request quite a bit, but there are not very many options for no-cost travel to and from locations outside of the U.S. One group that has started doing this is a group called Miracle Flights. You can find them at miracleflights.org. They do commercial travel internationally. There's no one currently doing private jets internationally, except for on occasion corporate jets will do it through a group called Corporate Angel Network that books seats on corporate flights, and that'll be in your ebook too as well. And then there are some exceptions for travel from Caribbean islands to the mainland. If you're in the Southeast, that is a group called Angel Flight Southeast that does those types of flights. And as I mentioned earlier, within other countries, there are some other Angel Flight type organizations that will provide those donated flights. So domestic long distance, let's say you have to travel coast to coast or significant distance, let's say more than 1,000 miles away. That can sometimes be arranged by charitable aviation organizations. These are non-emergency too, and typically there's a few days notice. I mentioned one group, Miracle Flights. There's other groups that also have commercial airline resources. We here at Angel Flight West are fortunate to have a generous partnership with Alaska Airlines that donates close to 1,000 tickets per year for us to use for patients traveling within Alaska, from Alaska to the lower 48, and other Alaska routes within the lower 48 and Hawaii. Hawaiian Airlines also donates those for people traveling within the Hawaiian Islands. There are other groups. Angel Flight Northeast, for example, has a partnership with JetBlue. All the Angel Flight organizations do have some Southwest vouchers that are administered by a group called Angel Flight Central. And there is a group called patienttravel.org that deals with American Airlines that can also arrange commercial travel for domestic long distance flights. The best resource for those to see them kind of at a glance is that address that I mentioned earlier and that's on your screen, patienttravel.org. That's the one for American Airlines, and if you go to aircarealliance.org, it will list some of the relationships in the other areas. Domestic regional, and this happens for most patients that need specialized treatment, typically can find it within 1,000 miles of their home. And that is the sweet spot for services like Angel Flight West and other volunteer pilot organizations where there's no cost travel. We do require at least 5 days notice to arrange these flights, and the patient must be medically unstable and ambulatory. But those types of needs are perfect. And when you think of 1,000 miles, think of it the way a crow or an airplane flies, not driving miles. So for Angel Flight West, that really extends from, if you were coming from Southern California, you could go up to Seattle, you could go as far west as New Mexico, Colorado, that type of thing. If you were in the center of Colorado, 1,000 miles is almost any place except for the far East Coast. And that's kind of the range of these small aircraft that are being donated. For the most part, that would take a good chunk of a day to go 1,000 miles, and that's why that limitation is there. That it starts to become a little bit unfeasible in these type of aircraft. So how does this work? You've heard about Angel Flight. Maybe you've requested us before. Maybe you haven't. If you have requested, I hope I can shed some light on different areas. If you haven't, we'll just briefly go through how this works. So travel is scheduled for the patient need. So the patient comes to us, or the medical facility, a healthcare professional comes to us and says, I have a patient that lives in rural Montana that needs care at Salt Lake City. So we find the nearest small airport to their home. These aren't commercial airports, only account for about 10% of the total airports in this whole country. The rest are these small private airports that maybe you drive by or you think about every once in a while. But typically, even in rural areas like Montana, there's lots of small airports close to the home. And then we'll fly to the nearest airport close to their treatment. In Utah, there is both a private and a commercial airport in Salt Lake City that our pilots would fly into. But in different areas, there's different treatment centers. So let's say you're going to one of the Stanford hospitals or Lucile Packard Children's Hospital. We'd fly right into there to Palo Alto, which is a small airport. It's easy to get to and from Stanford. UCSF, for example, San Francisco International Airport is difficult for small planes to get in, so most of the small planes would go to Oakland, which is a little bit further away, and then we would work with the patient to get their transportation from Oakland Airport to UCSF, and sometimes we can find volunteer drivers for that or help them navigate if they don't have other options. Scheduling the flight around your patient's appointment. The only exception to that would be a group called Corporate Angel Network that deals with existing corporate travel and finds seats on the airplane for them. So let's say the Coca-Cola based in Atlanta has a jet that regularly goes from LA to Atlanta, and there was someone in Atlanta that needed to go to UCLA Medical Center for some reason. So they would call Corporate Angel Network and say, hey, I've got this need. Is there anyone that goes regularly from Atlanta to Los Angeles? And if there was a corporate flight that had a seat available, they could put that patient on there. The only qualification for that is for a Corporate Angel Network is cancer patients only. And their contact information will be in the ebook that we send you later. And if you have any questions about us, we can connect you with them as well. Like I said earlier, ground transportation is sometimes available. Angel Flight West is rapidly trying to expand our ground transportation options for patients, because believe it or not, we get turned down quite a bit, as maybe you do when you're scheduling treatment, for folks that can't navigate once they get to a city on how to get to the hospital. So we try to take that obstacle away and remove that barrier by using what we call Earth Angels, which are volunteer drivers that volunteer, much like the pilots do, to serve the patient need and get them to their life-changing healthcare that you all provide. So once that flight request is entered, and we do require some documents for you, and it's all online. You can request online. We'll give that link for you here in a little bit, or you can just go to angelflightwest.org if you're requesting with us, or one of those other websites we mentioned earlier if you're requesting for someone else. And we vet the patient need, make sure there's a financial need. We get the medical release from the passenger and make sure it's within the mileage and limitations that we can provide. And then once we enter all of that information into our website, we start looking actively for volunteer pilots who are willing and able to find the flight. They get notifications, phone calls, emails, texts that say, hey, there's a flight in your area. Are you able to do it? If you think about it a little bit, we're kind of like the Uber for charitable transportation. We've got this group of pilots, or in Uber's case, they would be drivers. And then we've got these group of people wanting services or flights, and we match them in the middle. But obviously, there's no payment transaction. All the flights are donated by the pilots. And we as an organization run on grants and donated funds to be that matchmaker and provide the software and platform where we can connect willing volunteers and patients in need. Once we find the match, we let you, the healthcare professional, and the patient know. And then the pilot then contacts the passenger directly to make the arrangements on where to meet, what time, what their airplane looks like, what they'll be wearing, what to expect on a small flight. A lot of our patients have never flown before, so we walk through all that process. And then we're aware that actually close to 30% of our flights end up canceling because the passenger needs to cancel for whatever reason. The appointment gets canceled, their white blood cell count isn't high enough to receive treatment, they're not feeling well, they've been hospitalized. There's a whole host of issues that happens. And the pilots and our organization know that there's no pressure to travel. We do ask for as much notice as possible because oftentimes our volunteers are taking a whole day off to fly these flights. So we appreciate the most notice we can and just be in constant communication. But we know that sometimes things cancel, and that's okay. On the flip side, sometimes we need to cancel. If you're a requester on here, a healthcare professional that we've ever canceled on, we apologize. We complete more than 90% of our flights, so we are very reliable. But there are times where weather's really bad and we won't fly if conditions aren't safe. In our 35 years and close to 70,000 flights, we've never had an incident where a patient was killed in an accident on board or even had a major accident on board. That's never happened, and that's because we stress safety and our pilots know that things are safe. So we work with you then to reschedule if that's possible. Or if it's not possible, then we ask that the patient have some sort of backup plan if they have the ability to. Otherwise, we always work with you. We'll never strand a patient at the medical facility. We'll pay for a commercial flight home, or we'll find a bus, or lodging for a couple of nights until we can find a pilot, that kind of thing. We're always working with you, the healthcare professional, and the patient themselves to make sure they are getting the transportation needs covered. So I spoke a little bit about what's required earlier in terms of requesting the flights, but we do require a medical release. It needs to be signed by a patient's physician or nurse practitioner. That basically what we're asking, that the patient is okay to fly in a small non-pressurized aircraft and their condition won't affect the safety of an aircraft. So if someone has grand mal seizures or has some PTSD or something where you, the healthcare professional, is concerned about how they might react in a small airplane and cockpit, if that concern exists, then we would say that this resource is not the right one for your passenger. If not, then most folks can travel on this, and doctors will know if there's any kind of heart condition or blood pressure instance that will be affected by altitude. That's the only other thing to be concerned for. The pilots are going to fly at a safe altitude and make sure that the passenger has the oxygen needed at those altitude for a normal person. So they'll work with them on that. And that the patient needs to be able to get in and out of a small airplane with limited assistance and sit up. This is more of a logistical issue. Obviously, these planes are small and the ability to lay down doesn't exist in most of these airplanes. And for safety concerns, patients would actually need to get out of an aircraft if anything happened or they needed to get out. We would want them to be able to get out with limited assistance. Pilots are there to help, and often there's a co-pilot or what we call a mission assistant to help too. But that's what we're requiring in terms of the medical release. In terms of the request for medical appointment, this is all found on our website. It'll be included in the ebook afterwards that we send you. But we're just making sure the patient meets the criteria we outlined earlier. And then all you need to do is contact the organization in your area. You can feel free to call us. We're old school. We like to talk on the phone. If you call us, someone answers. But you can also request online. All the forms are there. If your facility works a lot on faxes, we have a fax paperwork packet that we send that can be filled out to request. The patient can request a lot of this information directly with us, but when it comes to medical release and confirming appointments and so forth, we will need the healthcare professional to get involved at that point. And we just encourage that as much information as possible up front will make your life and our life much easier, and the arranging of the flight much more seamless. Time of the appointment, name and contact of a physician or someone who we can send the medical release to, passengers' weight, list of companions, their weights, where they're going to and from, all those kind of logistical informations to arrange the flight is what we need up front. And again, those are on our website, or if you would like us to, we can fax you or request your packet for your department. So we're fortunate to fly here at Angel Flight West about 1,500 patients a year, and everyone has their unique story, and there isn't a day that goes by that we aren't moved and inspired by their courage in facing difficult circumstances and getting the care they need. And likewise, we're continually amazed at the services and care provided by you, the social worker, the doctor, the nurse, the case manager, the patient navigator. It does take a whole team on the journey for healing and hope, and we're proud to be a part of that team. Talia is one of our favorite little girls we fly. She has leukemia and requires treatment to Salt Lake City. She travels from St. George, Utah, to Salt Lake City. And a lot of people, when they think of air transportation, think of long distances. And we use this example specifically to let you know that there's a lot of your patients that are traveling maybe 75, 100 miles that you think, oh, that's just a couple-hour car ride. But for a lot of patients, I'm sure you know that either ground transportation can be an issue, or their condition itself can be an issue in terms of sitting in a car for long periods of time. You know, Talia is an example that her mom would drive her because the dad had to work and they had other kids in school. So she would drive her back and forth to St. George before they found out about Angel Flight. And oftentimes coming home from chemo, you know, Talia's in the back seat, mom's driving. Talia gets sick from the chemo, so she's got to try to pull over and help her daughter while clean up from getting sick. And that's a serious emotional toll. It's not safe to be driving in conditions like that when you're both emotionally and physically affected. And it was just really hard on the family to take that time away from work and the cost that it took to get back and forth. And Angel Flight West, when they found out about us, were able to step into that situation. The pilots were able to ease that burden by providing quick and easy means to get back and forth from St. George to Salt Lake City. This is another child. Angel Flight, by the way, helps people of all ages. We have about a third of our flights are for kids, but all ages can apply for Angel Flight. Noah is born with a genetic disease, Morquio type A. He was accepted into this clinical trial at Oakland Children's, but the family was at Porterville, and they didn't really have many resources for transportation. But Angel Flight is able to fly Noah for once a month for his whole clinical trial to receive the treatment he needed for his rare and serious birth defect. Xavier is an example of someone who was a burn survivor, lived in rural Colorado, and he needed treatment at Denver that wasn't available to him locally. We were able to pick him up and fly him back and forth so his family would have one less thing to worry about. Another good example of someone that would be appropriate for Angel Flight. So here's where we need your help. Right now, I'm sure that many of you have a patient that you think could be benefit from Angel Flight. And I know a lot of you have multiple different resources for your patients, right? You've got Southwest Airlines vouchers, you've got bus tickets, you've got gas cards. And we want to be one of those resources for you that can be the most efficient and effective way to serve your patient. And unfortunately, the status story we hear is that someone did not get the medical treatment because travel was too difficult or expensive, or they didn't know about us. So we're asking you to help us reach those people by referring us to your patients, by requesting flights with us. You each work in a hospital that you touch multiple different social workers, doctors, nurses. Please forward our ebook to them. Let them know about our services. You can forward the link to this presentation. And if you're interested in an in-service presentation by one of our volunteers or staff, we would welcome that opportunity. This webinar is great, but the interactiveness of it can be difficult in a large setting or a virtual setting. And we might be able to even troubleshoot some patient cases that you have individually to see how we can help or what resources might be available. But we do like to meet person to person. We want to be part of your team in the health and healing of your patients. And again, there's no ulterior motive here. This is all no cost, donated by our pilots. We are here to serve you and your patients, and we want to do that more often than we're doing now, because we know we're just scratching the surface in terms of the total need for this type of service. All right, so I think I've talked enough. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing my voice. So here's the chance for you to ask some questions. If you can click the Q&A icon, open a chat room. And if not, I think that icon should be open. And I see we've got actually several flights here already. So why don't I jump in here? Someone asked, can you do shorter notice flights? So like I said, we're not locked in a box in terms of the type of flights that we can arrange. Best practices for us is that 5-day notice, because we are working with volunteers that are trying to clear their schedule for these flights, and many of which are not available short notice. If you do have a shorter notice flight, let's say like 2, 3, 4 days, you can always call us or contact us. If it's in an area where we have lots of other flights scheduled, or we have a high volume of volunteer pilots, our coordination team, depending on workload, can often accommodate those. But the 5 days is kind of the best practice. And I know that's difficult. I know hospitals put a lot of pressure on social workers to discharge people specifically on short notice, get out 24 to 48 hours. And that's difficult for us to accommodate. But even if like, okay, we think it's going to be about a week, that's even better, because we can schedule that, get a pilot, and then oftentimes they can adjust a day or two if they need to. But the kind of fire drill for a day or two, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver for you. So those can be more difficult, and that 5 business days or 5 total days is really the best practices for that. Let's see. Piper asks, how do I find out if Earth Angels are available in my area? You can contact us. If you're in the West Coast, Piper, we have Earth Angel services in Oregon, in the Seattle area, in Southern California, in Utah, and we're just starting to launch a little bit more in the Bay Area and a little bit in Phoenix. And Denver is the other area we've got them too. Andrea, how do I get a copy of the ebook? We'll email that after this to all the patients. I'll put up our info here too, in terms of our phone number, the link to request our flights, the other charitable aviation organizations that I touched on, aircarealliance.org, are all there on the screen now. And we'll send this link to this presentation here for you too, so you've got it. There's a question here that says, what if my patient needs to travel repeatedly? Great question. A lot of our passengers actually travel repeatedly. You met Noah there that was traveling once a month. Some people travel weekly. We can often accommodate that. We had a little kid in Arizona that was going from Sholo to Phoenix for dialysis 3 times a week, and his situation was unique enough that we were able to accommodate those flights 3 times a week. If it gets to be more than once a week, it's kind of a decision based on our resources, whether we feel like we can accommodate that heavy of a request load. Again, we do it on a case-by-case basis, depending on geography and location and distance and all those types of things. But yes, it's not limited in terms of how many times someone can fly. We've had Angel Flight passengers fly over 150 total flights while they were undergoing their treatment. Next question, is flying in small planes safe? The statistical answer to that is flying in any kind of plane is actually the safest form of transportation there is. I mentioned earlier we've had over close to 70,000 flights, and we've never had an incident where a patient was injured or killed on a flight. So yes, flying in small planes are safe, or as safe as any form of transportation. Jenny is asking, are there exceptions to the 1,000-mile rule? For Angel Flight West specifically, if it goes over 1,000 miles, we can often accommodate it on Alaska Airlines, if it's where Alaska Airlines flies, or on a Southwest Airlines voucher, if that's the case, or we can refer to other groups that can help in those cases of over 1,000 miles. If we're talking about in a small private airplane, other than the Corporate Angel Network, which I mentioned for cancer patients, where it's in a private corporate jet and you're riding along with, executives from Google or wherever, the 1,000-mile rule is just really not feasible for a patient, because you'd be talking about multiple different airplanes over several days. So after that, you need the kind of bigger jets or the commercial airlines. So that's how we work on that. But if your patient that you're thinking of, Jenny, needs over 1,000 miles, talk to us and we'll try to refer you to a organization that might be able to help fit that need. Any other questions? Thanks for those. All right, well, if there's no other questions, I just want to really thank all of you for the life-changing work that you do. We hear it from patients all the time about how well they're treated by their care teams at the different facilities they're receiving their health care. I know you guys are much like us, overworked and underpaid, but I just want to encourage you to keep up the great work. You are making a huge difference, and the fact that people need to travel to you to receive the health care you need is testament enough to the life-changing work that you're doing. So just want to encourage you to keep at it and to work with us. Don't be afraid to request more often. That's what we're here for, to serve you and your patients. And I want to thank you for taking time out of this election Sunday. Go America, and thank you again. We'll be following up with email. If you have any other questions, that's how to contact us online, or you can email me at josho@angelflightwest.org. And we'd love to schedule in-service presentations, schedule flights for some of your patients that you need, and whatever else, however else we can be of service. So thank you very much, and we'll see you hopefully soon and talk to you all hopefully soon.